Right, my name's Chris Spencer-Smith, and I am a resident of Dorset. I'm a member of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. I was previously a nurse, but unfortunately I had to take ill health retirement because of disability. My first ever protest was actually outside the South African embassy, and this was against apartheid, and it was well, campaigning for the release um, of Nelson Mandela because he was still in jail. So this was like very early 80s, and so on. In maybe before I haven't got a date in a diary, so I don't know exactly when it was. So that was my first experience of protesting for such a cause, and actually they're quite strongly aligned because of the apartheid aspects of it as well with what's happening in Palestine. Um, so things died down for a number of years after that, and I had my own sort of personal challenges to deal with, notwithstanding the difficult time I had at school, both particularly Queen Elizabeth, which kind of sort of shook my world somewhat. So I had a lot of time. I had to do a lot to recover from that. I left with no qualifications. I had to, go to college so I could become a nurse, which was fantastic. Wonderful thing that I did for me personally. Yeah, and I actually was a children's nurse. So children are very much at the heart of my kind of being, really. But also just supporting people, helping people when they're hour of need, and stuff like that. Because obviously, serious ill health is it's very destructive. For a nurse, you see it every day, but for the family, it's a unique experience. So it's kind of trying to support them through that. So that kind of shaped me into the person that not perhaps shaped me. I was already the person I was, but it kind of developed the person I was. So, and then I became aware. I can't quite remember how, but I became aware of what was happening across Palestine in relation to the treatment of Palestinians by the Zionist government, and the oppression, the apartheid, I don't. There wasn't any kind of talk about genocide at that time that I recall, but I was certainly aware that they were pushing Palestinians out of their land, out of their homes, demolishing homes, taking it over. So they're gradually, the borders that the Palestinians were able to operate or live within safely became smaller and smaller and smaller. So I was aware of that. But obviously, after October 7th, things really escalated. It became much more sort of prominent in the news, and the atrocities were very, very rapidly escalated. I mean, children were dying hand over fist. I mean, so many. I know I focus on children. I care about all the civilians, but like I said, at the heart of me are children, and children's well-being. And so that's when I joined PSM. I heard of it through social media. I was aware that there was a protest happening in Bournemouth, so I went to that and never looked back. And I'm glad, I came across that. Very fortunate because it enabled me to take part in peaceful actions within Bournemouth and in the national London marches and so on, to challenge what was happening, to say I'm not prepared to be silent on this. I'm not going to prepare to look away, and that kind of thing. So that was fantastic. And one particular thing that we did quite early on in the beginning of February was, in collaboration with Led by Donkeys, we laid out pairs, sets of clothing for children along Bournemouth Beach, and it was 11,500 items, sets of clothing, and the it was quite, it was really quite, it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Also, an awesome memorial to those children that had lost their lives, who to this day remain nameless. And that was 11,500 at that time. We're currently dealing with a situation where we've got at least 17,000 children dead. It's going to be more. It's going to be more. There are many more children buried under the rubble and that kind of thing, and what have you. But that particular action really spoke to me, and it really it was so important, because it was about the children and because it was memorialising these nameless people, these numbers, because they're just numbers at the moment, and that shouldn't be allowed to be the case. Because when Israeli soldiers get killed, they're named. There was a man who burnt to death in Jabla, in the refugee camp there. He was receiving medical aid because he'd been injured. He was in a tent on a drip with his mother and his brother, and the IDF bombed the camp. His tent was set alight, and he burnt to death, and with his mother. And his brother was severely injured, and it's just going on and on and on and on and on. It's dreadful and heartbreaking, but I'm absolutely resolute. I'm not going to budge on this. I'm going to stick with this until things start to change, until we can somehow influence government into changing their kind of rhetoric on this, their policy or whatever, their approach on this, because it's completely unacceptable. They are complicit in a genocide. When they award weapons contracts to these companies in the UK, they know what these weapons are being used for. Of course they do. They're being dropped on children and other civilians across Gaza, and it beggars belief. And they're also making us complicit in it, the British people complicit in it, because a fair old whack of our taxes go to fund this. So they're without our consent, they are making us complicit too, which is completely unacceptable. Right, I got involved with the Palestinian Solidarity movement in Bournemouth because I saw a post on social media. I've been struggling to know what I could do to get involved in challenging what was happening in Palestine. I'd seen stuff in the news, albeit a bit sketchy. I do research things. I looked online and found out what was going on in more detail and that kind of thing. And it was whilst I was doing that I saw that there was going to be a protest in Bournemouth, set up and run by the Palestinian Solidarity movement. So that triggered me in getting involved with Palestinian Solidarity movement. So where the Palestinian, I'm part of that. I'm now part of that group of people, wonderful people. And basically, it's a group of like-minded people, and there's about 300 plus of us, which is really quite a good number, who all feel the same way I do. So it's great being with those people and protesting in solidarity against what's happening in Palestine. And I actually refer to them now as my family, because they're just so caring. We all take care of each other. It's very challenging because we do get abuse, particularly in London, not so much in Bournemouth, but so we support each other. It's a very good and cohesive group. We've done some really dramatic actions. So we've done the thing on the beach with the children's clothes. More lately, we've done the Red Line, which has travelled around the country. The Red Line it's a long piece. It's a piece of material about 3 meters wide, and it's about half a kilometre long. And the idea is that people march either side, holding onto it, and it's just this long red line. It represents the red line that Rishi Sunak set, saying basically if the Israelis go into Gaza, that's the red line. That's game over kind of thing. But Israel went into Rafah. That's it, and we all know the consequences of that. It was truly bizarre, because obviously the Israeli government was saying to the Palestinian people within Gaza, what you need to do, we create a humanitarian corridor, and you can go to this place and you'll be fine. It's safe there. But it wasn't safe, because then they'd start bombing. They'd shoot people who were travelling down the humanitarian corridor. They bomb people travelling down the humanitarian corridor, and so on. So that was the red line, and of course he allowed them to breach that red line that he set himself. And here we are now, and it's still the same situation. They're still going in, relentlessly bombing and things like that. I struggle to understand what Keir Starmer's red line is. He doesn't appear to have one. He believes, and he said it many a time, and so does David Lammy, that Israel has the right to defend itself. But there's an issue with that. I'll give an example, right? If if somebody breaks into your home and they attack you and they attack your family and try to kill your family, a robber, for example, under law you have the right to defend yourself to a certain degree. And actually, even if you end up accidentally killing them, then you have a defence. However, what you don't have the right to do is to leave your home, find out where that person lives, go to their home, kill their family, kill their neighbours, kill their relatives, and so on and so forth, and take over their home. And that's what's happening now. That's what the Israelis are doing, in under the guise of self-defence. So I don't understand what our government position is. They don't seem to have any kind of limit, any kind of red line. So the red line was fantastic. That was brilliant, and it's gone to. Obviously, it started in Bournemouth. The idea was taken from a protest that happened around the White House some months before. So we adopted it. We did it in Bournemouth. Very successful. Over 1,000 people came, and then we took it to Bristol. It's been to Brighton, it's been to Bristol again, it's been to Cardiff, it's been to London, very successful in London on the Main March, and so on. So a fantastic piece of peaceful action that actually sends a message about, these promises about, the limits that our government is prepared to accept, but there's been no consequences when those limits have been breached. So it's quite remarkable. There's other smaller actions that we do, which are prominent, generally speaking, in Bournemouth Square or whatever, and they're very effective as well. I just want to highlight those two things as being particularly, acute in my mind, because it's really about trying to bring the public in, talking to them, explaining to them what the red line means, explaining to them what the clothes on the beach mean, and that kind of thing. And it makes them, I'm hoping that those kind of actions make the public think, and actually, want to do something about it, put it in the context perhaps of their own lives, which is always something I want to do. The what if question. What if it was your child? What if it was your child's school being bombed? What if it was your hospital being bombed? What if it was your ambulance being bombed? All these things have happened in Gaza particularly, and yet there doesn't seem to be any movement from government on these things. They know they're happening, but I don't understand it. But it's about trying to, get the public to kind of wake up to what's going on, and want to take action. Actually, it happened really quickly, Damien. It was a lady who she actually knows me from the food bank that I volunteer in, and she came to me one day and she burst into tears. First of all, she burst into tears because I wasn't wearing my bangle, my Palestinian bangle, and she asked me why that was, and I did say to her privately it's because a particular person has made comment about it and were complaining that they'd seen me in the newspaper yet again. Why are you going on these Palestinian marches? Have you seen the We Will Dance Again, which is an Israeli propaganda-driven documentary, and so on. I didn't really kind of engage in that deep conversation with that person because clearly she was very adamant about her view. But this lady who came to the food bank, she burst into tears and she said to me, and this was just after the guy had burnt to death with his mother in that tent in Jabla. Also the same day, a school had been bombed by the Israelis yet again, and the school was being used to enable children to have polio vaccines because polio's on the upsurge in Gaza. So she was really distressed, and she said, "I've seen everything that's gone on before, and I just don't know what to do." She was really beside herself, and so I took her outside and had a chat with her, and I told her about PSM, and I said you could consider joining PSM. I have. I explained what we did and all that kind of thing. I explained it was all peaceful action that we took part in and that kind of thing. But she said to me, I feel like going up to London, banging on number 10 Downing Street, and waiting until they come out and explain to me why they are supporting a genocide in Gaza, why they are allowing licenses for military equipment to go to Israel that is then used to kill Palestinian civilians en masse. Um, and it kind of got me thinking. And she said, I can't do any of these things because I've got a disabled son and I can't, it's very difficult for me to get out. So I understood that. But I said, you could join our chat room and you could talk about things, you could get support there. Because you're not alone. There's so many people out there who feel like that. So I said, come and join. And she did, which is fantastic. But she planted a seed in my head. I thought, well, I can't go to Downing Street and bang on the door. I get shot apart from anything else because they've got armed policemen out there. But I thought, but actually I can go outside. I can camp outside. And I'd heard about the encampments in universities and stuff like that. And how, they're very brave individuals because they've had... they come under a lot of slack, particularly in America, particularly violent interactions with the police and initiated by the police, to add to that. And so I thought, well, I can just take a tent. I can pitch myself up on along Whitehall, just literally I was yards from Downing Street. Well, not actually yards, it's feet, literally feet. And so on. So I thought, well, I can do that instead. I said I did think about all the challenges that were involved, not least my disability and the fact that I've got complex health needs. I'm an epileptic. I have lots of medication that I need to take every day and things like that. But I did discuss it with my friends in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, and actually I was quite surprised because I thought they'd think, no, you can't do that, Chris, because you've got to think about your health. They did say you've got to think about your health, but actually they really embraced the idea and were so supportive and helping me set it up. It only took a couple of weeks to set things up, to borrow equipment, to buy equipment and things like that. So I had 100% support from the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. That gave me courage. That gave me the belief that I could do this. I am disabled, and throughout the period of disability, I've had to overcome boundaries or barriers that have been thrown before me, either because of how society works or because of the restrictions that bodily and what have you. So I've always been, ever since I've been disabled, I've always pushed against those barriers, and this was just another barrier to push against and to overcome, and I did. And I'm really pleased about it. On a personal level, I learned a huge amount about myself and about actually you can achieve these things. Just because you're disabled doesn't mean that you can't take action to raise, what is actually a very serious humanitarian catastrophe that's going on. Well, it's not catastrophe, it's just murder, but catastrophe in Gaza. So it was quite, from a personal level, it was a great growing period of my life for growth again. I've always tried to do that. So obviously I knew that it's a time of year it's going to potentially be inclement weather. It didn't rain, thank goodness, but and the weather forecast was good, but it actually turned out to be very cold. But I prepared meticulously. I made sure that I had things to keep me warm, etc., and initially some food and all those different things, all my medication and stuff like that, and a tent, of course. Somebody very kindly lent me a tent and an inflatable mattress so I wasn't in direct contact with the pavement and stuff like that. So I did a lot of preparation, but in a very short period of time. I also did other preparation around researching the issues that I was going to be talking about, because one of the things that people often say is, yeah, we say that, but where's the proof? And because I worked as a nurse, because your work as a nurse, your decision making, everything you do is evidence based. That's the first thing. So I had that ingrained, but also because I worked for the Royal College of Nursing as a regional officer and was representing people in various sort of employment cases and legal cases, evidence is king then. So I got that kind of fixed in my head. So I thought I'd go up with everything that I need to address the issues that I want to raise and to answer questions and things like that. So I've got all these little booklets that I put together and that kind of thing. So, I built up a very good plan, really good plan. I had a plan for each day, etc., etc. So it would be the most effective, you know, rollout of this sit-in. What was apparent is that they weren't happy for me to be there. Um, every single day, they sent police officers to come and tell me that I wasn't allowed to be there, that I was breaking the law. They were very vague about what law I was breaking because I asked them several times. Um, and but they came every day, and more, as the days went on, more and more police would come, more and more police would come along. And it's interesting actually because on the first day, I was seen by a policeman. He said, "You have to go. It's illegal." Blah blah blah. But actually, when he went away, a couple of the armed police from the courtyard of Number 10 came out and said, um, actually, do you want to take any notice of them? They might move you on, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is peaceful, because I'd already told them what I was doing out of courtesy, apart from anything else. and and they said, well, we're fine with you where you are. That's fine. Not to say that they won't try and move you again, but we are fine with what you're doing. We're happy with your approach, etc., etc. So that was quite good. But as the days went on, more and more police would come saying the same thing or different things. It was very inconsistent. Their messaging was very inconsistent, and I think it was actually a part of a kind of ploy to intimidate by unsettling me, telling me different things, and all that kind of stuff. I was moved 3 times. Well, no, I was moved twice rather. I was started outside Number 10, and then I was moved across to a grassed area just outside the Department of Defence, so the Ministry of Defence, or the Department of Murder, as I like to call them now. And then within 10 minutes, some armed police came out and said we're not allowed to stay there because they got a big meeting in the ministry, and they're complaining about you having a tent there and what have you. They think you're a security risk. I mean, how a man with a walker can be a security risk, I have no idea, but there we go. I'm obviously capable of a lot more than I think I am. But anyway, so I had to move a bit further down. The armed police said, they pointed to an area, a few yards away, and said, you can set up there. That's fine. But and I had a police officer visit me on a Tuesday who said that he, a plainclothes chap, he said, he talked to me about what I was doing. I gave him one of the leaflets. I explained it as peaceful action. I said how it was going to work, etc., etc. I made it abundantly clear that I'm not antagonistic. I'm not going to be aggressive, and so on. And he accepted that. He actually said, no, they're not supposed to. But he actually said this is a really good action. It's a very good way of getting things across to the public. And I said to him, I'm going to be staying till Friday out of respect for the Remembrance Sunday event. And I said that I put a cross on for my grandfather who was killed in the Second World War. So I very much embrace that kind of memorialising of our soldiers killed in the First and Second World War. And he said that's fine. With a stay till Friday. I'm very pleased that you're saying that you won't be staying any longer than Friday. So I'm happy for you to authorise you staying until Friday. So that seemed good. That was good news for me. I felt really pleased about that. But then the next day, I was the day went okay, and it was really good. It was the usual thing of engaging with the public and stuff like that. I was very positive. But in the evening, he came again. He reiterated what he said, that we're happy for you to stay until the Friday, etc., etc. But he only came along because there'd been a problem the night before, and he was aware of it. He wanted to check that I was okay. So I thought that was pretty good. But then about half an hour after he left, a van load of police came along, heavy-handed really, maybe to intimidate again. And 2 officers got out of the vehicle and came and spoke to me and said, you've got to go, you're not allowed to stay anymore. This is illegal, you've got to take your tent down, etc., etc., and be on your way, otherwise you'll be arrested. So then the guy who come in, the plainclothes guy who come earlier in the day, he given me the CAD number for my case. Apparently, I've got a case, and said if there's any more problems, just give the any officers a this number and they can look it up. So they did that. They went back to their van and then they came back and said, "It's all right, you can stay, no problem." And then within an hour, another van load of policemen turn up, even more of them in there this time, and two officers got out. One was a sergeant, and said, your protest is illegal. You're not allowed to stay here. We've spoken to the inspector at the control room, and the inspector is adamant that you've got to go, otherwise you'll be arrested. So I was put in a very precarious position because of my disability, my complex health needs. I decided, or it was also decided by others, that I shouldn't stay for my well-being, because I couldn't rely on them safeguarding my well-being if they arrested me and put me in a cell overnight. I've had lots of medication I have to take. I'm an epileptic. If I don't get my epilepsy medication, then I'm at risk of having a seizure within the cell. Can you be reliant on them monitoring you properly? Can you be reliant on them giving you your medication? Because I know of instances where people weren't given their medication when they need to have it. And so it was. I kind of accepted the fact that I was going to have to go. I was very upset. It was very distressing because of the reason why I was there. And actually, one of the colleagues from Palestinian Solidarity Movement phoned up and said, "We're taking you home. We're going to come and collect you from Dorset and taking you home for your own well-being." But in the meantime, a lady arrived who she's Palestinian. She said she was Palestinian. She's on a sightseeing trip around London. She's waiting for a friend to come the next day, and she'd just been in Parliament Square. Not in Parliament Square, sorry, in Trafalgar Square, and she was wandering down and she went past where I was. She saw what I was doing and she stopped and she talked to me. Her name is Feda, which actually, as it turned, I happen to know that Feda means sacrifice. She lives in America. She lives in Chicago, in a place called Little Palestine, of all things. It's the biggest concentration of Palestinians in America, and she told me that her name was Feda, and I knew it meant sacrifice. And she went on to tell me about her experiences, both seeing what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank and so on. But she talked about a very personal situation where her parents took her back to Gaza quite a few years back. I mean, Feda was only 30 when I saw her, met her, but she was obviously a lot younger. And they went on the March of Return, which is the march of. It's a very well known march, a peaceful march. Palestinians marching up to the perimeter fence or wall or whatever you want to call it, the edge of the concentration camp, as I would like to refer to it as. And the IDF stationed snipers along the route and were taking pot shots at the protesters, killed several, including her sister, who was only 9. She was shot in the head, and killed other members of her family. Many people were killed that day. I don't have a figure in front of me to say how many, but it was, let's be clear, it was a peaceful protest about their right to return to their lands and their homes and things like that, and not to be subject to the oppression they've been experiencing since 1948 in escalating ways. It's a stunningly sad situation that so many people got killed on the March of Return when they're protesting peacefully by these cowards sitting on a wall and shooting them deliberately shooting people in their legs so they'd be crippled, and deliberately shooting people in the head so they kill them, and things like that. It's just utterly unbelievable. So that really resonated with me. And the police were sitting in the van, and I went to speak to them. I said, obviously, you're wanting me to go. I'm just letting you know that I will be going, and I'm waiting for somebody to pick me up from Dorset. But I said, I pointed to Feda, who was still there. Stay with me for 2 hours as it happens. I said to that lady's called Feda, and that means sacrifice. And let me just tell you a little bit about Feda. And I told them about her family, about her sister being shot dead, and things like that. She's made the true sacrifice, and she is emblematic of the reason that I'm here is emblematic of the reason that many of us are protesting every single week. You know, millions of people across this country, you know, over 1 billion worldwide. She is emblematic of that. And every single Palestinian family that I met during those few days. And I said, she's the reason I'm here. But what you're doing is you're denying me the opportunity to peacefully stand up for her, the people in her country, stand up for the people across Gaza and in the West Bank who are continuing to suffer oppression and murder, because it can only be described as murder, because they are being targeted. And so you're denying me that opportunity. And I then talked about the number of children that had died, 17,000, the number of children who are probably under the rubble, the number of children who've been made orphans, the number of children who've lost limbs, you know, and things like that. And you know, I was so shocked that I couldn't see anything in their eyes, in their face, to say to me that actually felt something about that. They were just quite cold about it, and that was just really quite shocking, to be quite honest. And so, like I said, I left. I felt like I'd failed, completely and utterly failed. That, you know, I wasn't able to get to the end point of my planned action and speak to more people, try to help more of the public understand what's going on. So I was bitterly disappointed. I've had the chance to reflect. Lots of people said to me, you haven't failed, you've done really well. And I've had the opportunity to reflect on it. And I think about actually the things that I did achieve while I was there. One particularly poignant thing that I achieved was I became aware that people in Palestine were hearing what we're doing. They're seeing, there's some access to social media, including Instagram, and so they were seeing they see what we're doing. They see that there's millions of people in this country, and you know, over 1 billion across the world, who are being their voice, that they are with, you know, that we hear them, that we see them as human beings, and that we are standing up with them against this, you know, tyranny, whatever we want to call it, genocide, you know, 100% with them. And I got messages back saying they're so grateful. And the fact it was getting through to the people that we actually, you know, taking action for, whose voices we are raising to the rafters, is such an important win. I felt like it was a massive win. I did look at Downing Street and I thought, well, that's going to be a hard nut to crack, and it is. And we have to keep working on that. But the fact that the Palestinians know that we are doing these things, it gives them hope. It makes them feel like people see us. People are doing things to help us and stuff like that. And that is so important, because so often I hear people saying, well, we go on these marches and it doesn't really make a difference, and you know, when nothing's changing. But I can now say to people, well, actually, it is changing things, because the Palestinians are beginning to feel hope because of what we're doing, and that's such a massive achievement, not just because of the action I did, but because the actions that are happening in this country and across the world. People see it, the Palestinians see it, and that is so important, a massive win. I don't believe that this country is on the side of genocide. I don't believe that this country supports what's happening in Gaza, and I don't believe this country ever supported things that are happening elsewhere. As a country, actually, the people, the ordinary people, have been very clear in terms of protests and things like that, about what's going on in the world and our government's reaction to it. And that's the important thing. It's how our government responds to these things. It's how business put pressure on our government to respond to these things. Because let's make no mistake, you know, the capitalists, and I, you know, use that term very perhaps tightly really, but the businesses in this country and elsewhere actually lobby government on various aspects of what's happening in the world, because they have vested interests. It's about money, it's about oil, it's about resources, it's about land, all these usual things, typical kind of colonialist leftovers. We've never really shaken our colonial past, because it's our present now. And like you say, siding with the oppressor. We still do it. We've done that over the decades, and we're doing it now. We haven't changed. We haven't learned any lessons, and that's just genuinely shocking. But so we need to work on changing the government position on this, and so we have to be really vehement in our beliefs and about how businesses are capitalists or whatever, the elite or whatever, who have vested interests, how they shouldn't be allowed to influence government rhetoric or policy, but they do. And it's happened for young. It's not a recent thing. It's not like the previous Conservative government. It's not the current Labour government. It's been going on for years, because I've seen it. There's been atrocities across the world for many decades, and yet we pick and choose as a country, or as a government rather, which ones are going to be we're going to be against and which ones we're not. And it all seems to tie in with, like I said, the resources, the land, the power, all those different things. And so, it's a tough nut. But I honestly believe that the British people do not embrace genocide, because when you talk to people, nobody says, when you're talking about genocide, you're talking about the number of children who are dying, the number of civilians who are dying, and the kind of things that are happening, ambulances being blown up by the IDF, hospitals being blown up by the IDF, schools being blown up by the IDF, refugee camps being blown up by the IDF. Nobody says, oh, well, nobody accepts it. Everybody said, the vast majority of people say it's wrong, it's totally unacceptable, what are our government doing about it, etc., etc. And that's where the power lies, really, with the people who vote these MPs in. And so we need to harness that power. And one thing that this action taught me is that actually there are different ways that you can do that. Not everybody wants to go on marches. They don't feel safe, or they just don't feel confident about it, or anything like that. They don't have the time because they have their own lives to deal with, and so on. But so many people want to do something about it. So it's really about developing a toolkit, strategies that we can, with support from the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, other Palestinian pro-Palestinian groups across the country. What we need to be doing is we need to be developing a toolkit for the public to use, and to push and to implement that with our support. Our support is going to be critical in achieving that. So, for example, one of the things is about emails. A guy came to me on the Wednesday and he said, this is dreadful, I just don't know what to do. So I said to him, and he said, I can't go on marches, etc., etc. I can't because, some people are worried about their careers. We all know that that people frequently get accused of anti-Semitism because they're against what's happening, what the IDF, what the Zionist government are doing. That's now deemed to be anti-Semitism, and it clearly isn't. But they're frightened of being accused of that, and how it could affect their lives, how it could affect their careers, and that kind of thing. And it has affected people's lives, and it has affected people's careers. So it's not like it's something that they're unwarranted in worrying about. There's many examples. So, but writing to your MP, emailing your MP, filling their inbox up with emails about that say what is happening in Gaza or across Palestine is not acceptable. Our involvement in supporting that, our government's involvement in supporting that is not acceptable, and this has to change. So those are small actions that they can do that doesn't put their head above the parapet as such, but it enables them, because they're concerned, to raise the issue. And the thing is that if enough people do that kind of thing, then these politicians will start listening. They'll start talking to each other. Oh my gosh, my inbox was full today with more emails from constituents raising the issue of Palestine, and saying how unhappy they are, and how we need to change what we're doing. We need to change our tack, etc., etc. We need to stop supporting this genocidal regime, and things like that. It can be a very powerful tool. And if going back to my previous role when I was working for the RCN, we had a serious issue within the Southwest about healthcare issues, and I won't go into the detail, but basically what these a group of trusts want to do, they were in secret concocting a plan to change things for staff, and we got wind of it because somebody leaked it, thank goodness. And so what we did, we very quickly put a campaign together, and the campaign involved encouraging our members to email. We came up with a standard email that they could change, to email their MP and say, this is not acceptable, what is being proposed is not acceptable, and we want to meet with you in the constituency office. And so many people sent that email. They would convert, change some of the wording to suit them and that kind of thing, but they all sent this email. And I went to a couple of meetings with them in the constituency office with constituents who were our members to meet their MP. And every time the MP said, please stop emailing me, because my inbox is full of emails about this, etc., etc. They didn't make any commitment to do anything. There was a lot of discussion about, what we felt they should do. But in the end, and actually quite quickly, the whole thing fell apart. They said, we're not going to do this. That's it. And so, the power of voters, the power of constituents raising these things with their MP is significant, and it's something that we have to capitalise on. And we can support the public in doing that by making sure they, actually ask for for the email, ask to meet with your MP, and then we just go with a number of people, with other constituents, and somebody from the group goes to support those constituents, and so on. And I believe that is a way of trying to exact some change, because social media is great, and you can put stuff on, you can make comments on Twitter and all that kind of thing, saying this isn't acceptable. People respond to tweets that are put out by Starmer and by Lammy, and news articles and stuff like that, saying this is appalling, etc. But it doesn't cut it. It doesn't get through, because nothing is changing. That's been going on for a long time, and it's been going on before on other sort of not similar issues, because this is quite unprecedented what's happening across Palestine. But getting on social media and complaining that way just doesn't work. You have to directly lobby your MP. Do what the capitalists do what the businesses do. Lobby. As a voter, you have the right to lobby your MP about things that you feel unhappy about. And that is so important. It's a really powerful tool. So it's something that we really must push ahead. Marches are great. It raises the profile very significantly. But it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to be engaging with the public, and that's something that I learned while I was doing this action, is that we need to engage with the public more. And that was actually the main reason why I did it, because I wanted to engage with the public, because I always believed that was the best way to get the public on board, to win hearts and minds. They're already won, actually, to be quite honest. But it gave me ideas for taking this forward. That we can take forward as a group, and perhaps potentially nationally. I was thinking we could just have a week where everybody emails their MP, and they'll just be like, oh my God, all these emails, and they will react. That will be quite significant.